This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Bounce back. The rally holds for a second day. The Dow logs its best two-day point gain ever. Is this the turning point that investors have been looking for? No clear path. The U.S. economy grows as global economies hit a rough patch, complicating the picture even more for the Federal Reserve. And off the charts, the best car Consumer Reports has ever tested. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Thursday, August 27th. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sue Herrera. Tyler Matheson is off tonight. Solid growth. The U.S. economy grew more than originally thought in the second quarter, helped by a trifecta of spending by consumers, businesses, and governments. Gross domestic product, the broadest measure of economic activity, expanded at 3.7%, above expectations of 3.2%. And that wasn't the only positive economic report. The job market also remains healthy. Claims for first-time unemployment benefits fell by 6,000 last week to near historic lows. And homebuyer demand remained steady in July as pending home sales, a forward-looking gauge of U.S. home sales, rose 0.5%. But these numbers stand in contrast to what's happening in other parts of the world, where stock markets are falling and global growth may be slowing. And nowhere is the confluence of events more evident than at the meeting of central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where the Federal Reserve's next move is very much in focus. Steve Leisman is there.
This grizzly bear stands at the entrance to the Fed's deliberations in Jackson Hole, a threatening reminder that they may not be out of the woods when it comes to the dangers of raising interest rates. But one Fed official is ready to stare down the bear.
This week's events complicate the picture, but I think it's too soon to say it fundamentally changes that picture. So in my own view, the normalization process needs to begin, and the economy is performing in a way that I think it's prepared to take that.
It's a major question for the Fed, to be deterred by the markets or propelled by the better economic data. Rate hike advocates like George got ammunition today in the form of a major upgrade to GDP in the second quarter to 3.7%. Every major component, the consumer, business, and government, was revised higher. It was a substantial bounce back from the weak growth that started the year.
I think in particular it was very good to see more investment, because I think that's been one of the challenges where we haven't been seeing enough investment, and I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't been seeing wage growth. So if we can get more investment, that means firms are more comfortable with where the economy is going, less uncertainty, there'll be more hiring, more wage growth, and then we're on a good path.
But there are those who say the Fed should fear the markets more.
The case for September was weakening even before the sell-off. And I think the sell-off does matter, even though you absolutely shouldn't set policy for the benefit of the markets.
And here in Jackson Hole, there's another element for the Fed to consider: politics. Protesters led by Nobel Prize-winning economist Joe Stiglitz delivered a petition with 110,000 signatures urging the Fed to stand pat so workers' wages could rise.
I don't see this as a hard call. And what is interesting is that the widespread support among people who are not of the mindset of the Fed, not involved in the financial markets, people who are really concerned about the real economy, there's a broad consensus. This is not the time to be raising interest rates.
As Fed officials prepare to meet, the mountains are shrouded in clouds, a bit like the outlook for Fed policy ahead. No doubt there's a bear lurking in those woods. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Leisman in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
No bear today. Stocks soared for the second straight day, helping the Dow index log its best two-day point gain ever. It is the latest big move in a week chock full of them. The Dow has already traveled more than 10,000 points since Monday, and there's still one more day to go in this week. At the finish today, the Dow rose 369 points to 16,654, closing out of correction territory. The Nasdaq, also out of a correction, climbed 115, and the S&P 500 gained 47. Could this be the turning point that investors have been looking for? Bob Pisani reports from the New York Stock Exchange.
The rally held for a second day, but not without a lot of drama. For example, the Dow went up 2% in the last 45 minutes. That's pretty amazing. Once again, looking at a chart of the Dow really doesn't do justice to the volatility. This is the way to look at the day. The Dow opened up 200 points, then rallied another 180 points in the afternoon, then fell apart in the afternoon, dropping 300 points, and then rallied 330 points into the close. Traders bought stocks hand over fist. There were 7 stocks advancing for every 1 declining. Volume was heavy once again, though not as strong as early in the week. The most widely held names, Apple and Microsoft, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Pfizer, all were up 2 to 3%. A 10% rise in crude made energy stocks the star performer. Now, if you just look at the 300-point rise in the Dow, along with yesterday's 600-point rally, you might be tempted to say that we have turned the corner. But the crazy intraday moves do not inspire confidence. We need to see a few more boring August days before traders feel the worst is behind us. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Bob Pisani at the New York Stock Exchange.
As Bob just mentioned, energy stocks moved higher on that spike in oil prices. West Texas Intermediate settled up more than 10%, its best one-day rise in 6 years. Much of the gain is being attributed to a technical move, but as Jackie DeAngelis tells us, some experts may be starting to change their thinking about where prices are headed.
Crude oil seeing a near $4 pop today, having its best day since April 2nd, 2009. Even the strong dollar couldn't hold crude down as strength in U.S. equities lifted it higher. The conversation in the pits today, have we bottomed? Certainly we've had that conversation before, and we've seen head fakes before as well. But this time traders think that crude could be working itself out. In terms of data, yesterday a draw in crude inventories added support to prices. Remember though, this is typically the time of the year that we start to see strong builds. That could still be coming, but perhaps a little bit delayed. Tomorrow, we're going to get rig counts from Baker Hughes, which may give us some insight into how production will trend here in the United States. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Jackie DeAngelis.
The big market swings have grabbed the attention of the individual investor who wants to know what they should do with their investment and retirement accounts. John Sweeney, Executive Vice President with Fidelity Investments, Planning and Advisory Services, is here to offer some insight on that. Good to see you, John. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Sue.
Let's start with who you are hearing from.
So we heard from 3 different kinds of investors. I'd call them the nervous investor, the confident investor, and the bold investor. And certainly on Monday, you had significantly elevated call volumes. People were concerned about the information coming out of Asia. They're concerned about oil and obviously the impact on the Federal Reserve. And so people were looking for information. The nervous investors, and there were very few of them, said, well, maybe it's time to take some profits off the table. The vast majority of investors, though, were confident. And the people who had plans, retirement plans, plans for college, and understood the roles of asset allocation in their portfolios, they were confident. And the very bold, they stepped in and they bought on the dips and they took advantage of the low prices.
What about those who might not have a plan? Because markets like this and volatility like this certainly rings home the fact that you don't have a plan and the market basically is controlling what you do.
Well, it's interesting. It's like a health scare. The doctor's been trying to get you to come in for an appointment. The same thing is happening this week with our representatives. So they've been calling people all summer, trying to get them to come in and establish plans. This was the precipitating event that actually sparked people to call us and say, we need to now come in and have a plan. We need to feel confident. So we've turned our phones outbound. We've been proactive at communicating with customers and trying to get them to say, now's the right time to come in and reestablish that plan.
What about trading activity? You mentioned that the bold investors are going in and buying. How significant has been the pickup in trading activity?
So Monday was a record trading day for Fidelity. Tuesday and Wednesday were top 10 trading days all in. Across the week, it's been buys almost 2 to 1, and you've seen a lot of activity, a lot of people stepping in, looking for bargains in an oversold market.
All right. Thank you so much for the insight, John. Appreciate it. John Sweeney with Fidelity Investments. And it's not just the individual investors that are keeping watch over all that market volatility, but also small business owners, because those concerns on Wall Street could trigger a change in thinking and spending on Main Street. Kate Rogers reports.
Very slow this June, July, especially August.
Noni's coffee shop in the Bronx, New York may be far removed from Wall Street and the deepening fears about China that have roiled global markets in recent days. But shop manager Ruth Zanatatos has been watching the stock market closely. After a slow summer, the business, which has been around for 40 years, was hoping for a pickup in the fall. This week's events have her concerned.
How are we doing? Good. If this continues and the economy take a hit, yes, it will happen that we weren't able to pay the rent and it's just gonna look like lock up the shop and go home. Because it's really, really bad.
Recent market moves come at a time when optimism among many small businesses is arguably holding steady. The National Federation of Independent Businesses Index for July showed gains, and lending, according to the Thomson Reuters PayNet Small Business Lending Index, hit its highest level since 2005 for the month of June. But having survived the ups and downs of the last recession, Zanatatos is cautious.
For the past 5 years, we haven't raised the price, and we're hoping to raise it now, and we're afraid. Eggs went up twice the price, and we cannot raise the prices.
While volatile market swings have little impact on the day-to-day operations of America's small businesses, if sustained, mom and pops may have some cause for concern.
Many Main Street businesses and their staffers rely heavily on 401k and IRA plans, which are subject to moves in the stock market.
Most Main Street businesses invest in their own retirement. They're self-funded plans like 401ks and IRAs, and when they fluctuate, it makes everybody nervous. The market has done quite well for the last several years. Main Street hasn't done all that well, but at least there was the confidence in the retirement system.
Zanatatos learned that lesson the hard way during the last downturn, having lost her 401k entirely. She no longer trusts the market.
No more. Yeah, a little saving now and then, here and there, working, trying to save a little on the side.
Like many on Main Street, she'll be watching Wall Street from afar. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Kate Rogers.
And still ahead, a well-known company that's not seeing a slowdown in China, at least not yet. That story is next. A glitch at BNY Mellon in calculating the prices of mutual funds and exchange-traded funds could continue into the weekend. This was all caused by a failed software upgrade last weekend, which has impacted calculations. The issue, of course, came right as we started this very volatile week. It affects about 20 mutual fund companies. Copper producer Freeport-McMoRan is cutting its spending, lowering production, and slashing jobs. This as it deals with a decline in copper prices and slowing growth worldwide, especially in China. Freeport plans to cut capital spending by nearly 30% and reduce headcount by 10%. That was enough to stem the drastic decline in its share price over the past few months and send that stock soaring 28% in the regular session. In after hours, the stock rose even more after Carl Icahn reported he's taken a stake in the company. Tiffany reported a decline in profits and cuts its earnings outlook for the year. That pressured shares, which finished down 2%. But the high-end jeweler isn't blaming China, where it does a lot of its business, for its lackluster quarter. At least it's not blaming it yet. Courtney Reagan has that story.
Tiffany & Company does 25% of its sales in the Asia-Pacific region, including China. In recent years, that region has been a source of growth, but lately, it's also a source of growing concern. In China, Tiffany's second quarter sales improved by double digits, but there was weakness in the numbers coming from Hong Kong and Macau. The retailer says it believes many Chinese tourists have shifted their traveling and shopping to other markets. The high-end jeweler also relies heavily on tourist spending in many regions around the world. That iconic blue box has long been the object of destination shopping for many international travelers, and almost half of its sales still come from the Americas. However, Tiffany says the strengthening U.S. dollar and subsequent weakening of foreign currency against the greenback has decreased tourist travel and spending in the U.S.
Moving forward, it's difficult to paint a clear picture. Oppenheimer & Company analyst Brian Nagel points out that recent market volatility, both in China and around the world, isn't captured in Tiffany's results.
I think we have to be careful here. These results were as of the end of July, so much of the stock market volatility happened after the Q2 results. But look, I think the real key positive in local currencies, you saw very good sales in Europe and in Japan, solid sales in China, and even the U.S. is actually holding up okay.
On the earnings call, Tiffany's chief financial officer reminded investors that when it comes to China, quote, it's not possible to quantify the positive wealth effect from a rising stock market on our sales growth. It's similarly difficult to predict any potential negative effect on sales in magnitude or duration from their recent stock market correction or currency devaluation. The high-end jeweler also says it remains focused on serving Chinese consumers around the world, and it's not altering its strategies in any way. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
A number of other retailers reported earnings today. Dollar General reported a rise in second quarter profits as people flocked to the discounter for bargains. Off-price retailer Burlington Stores topped analyst estimates for both revenue and earnings and raised its full-year outlook. And arts and crafts chain Michaels posted an increase in sales and raised its earnings guidance for the year. The CEO attributed the company's strong sales in part to its partnership with Pinterest. Dollar General fell while shares of Burlington and Michaels both rose. Coffee sales caffeinate J.M. Smucker's quarterlies, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The Folgers maker saw its coffee business surge, helped by higher prices. Profit and revenue came in better than expected. Shares were 6.5% higher to $116.29. Solid sales helped Signet post results that topped estimates. Same-store sales were better than expected, and those results were also helped by the firm's recent acquisition of the Zales brand. The stock popped 14% to $138.82. Caterpillar announcing plans to cut nearly 500 jobs because of declining revenue. The construction and mining equipment maker said it will consolidate several units of its customer services divisions. Shares were more than 2% higher to $75.66. Apple unveiling plans for a new product event on September 9th. The tech company is expected to present new iPhones and other devices. Apple has introduced a new iPhone model every year around this time for the past 3 years, but it's only dropping vague clues about the event. Shares were nearly 3% higher to $112.92. The Food and Drug Administration has approved Amgen's drug for patients with hereditary forms of high cholesterol. Last month, the FDA gave the okay to a similar treatment from Regeneron and Sanofi. These are part of a new class of injectable cholesterol drugs that work differently from statins. Shares were higher in after-hours trading, and at the end of the regular session, the stock was up 1% to $155.72. After 80 years of testing cars, Consumer Reports has done something few would have ever expected. It has given its first perfect score of 100. The car, the newest version of Tesla's Model S, and that helped send shares of the electric vehicle maker up 8%. Phil LeBeau has details on the latest Tesla road test.
Insane. Hold on to your seats. The performance version of Tesla's Model S has made history, doing so well in Consumer Reports testing, it went off the charts.
So it really kind of blew up our system, really. It scored actually above 100 before we actually had to make some changes to our scoring system to account for this car. It really does almost everything better, and it's something we aren't used to seeing from cars at all.
What's improved with the Model S P85D? With dual motors, it accelerates much faster, has better handling, and is more efficient according to Consumer Reports. For Tesla CEO Elon Musk, the praise validates his vision of building an electric car that also delivers great performance. The company says the Model S, being the first car to receive 100 out of 100 points, is truly a testament to our commitment to continually give our customers enhancements in range, performance, and value, and ultimately a better driving and ownership experience. An experience that comes at a hefty price. The P85D Model S sells for well over $100,000. And Consumer Reports is careful to point out this Model S is the best car it's ever tested, but it's not perfect, especially the center control screen.
A lot of the controls are actually in this big giant iPad, basically, that drives the car. There's a full web browser there, and you could access that while you drive. I think maybe Tesla went a little too far with that.
This review by Consumer Reports gives Tesla a boost as it approaches a critical moment next month. That's when it will unveil its next vehicle, the Model X. an electric high-end SUV. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Coming up, Katrina 10 years later, the uneven recovery in a city hit so hard by the costliest natural disaster in America. Here is what to watch for tomorrow, a report on personal income and spending, and another check on the consumer with the Consumer Sentiment Index. And that is what to watch for Friday. The city of New Orleans is proclaiming itself resilient today, 10 years after Hurricane Katrina nearly wiped out the city. By many measures, the city has recovered, and then some, but in other ways, it hasn't even come close. And all of that ties back to a federal response that has been as uneven as the recovery has. Scott Cohn covered the storm and its aftermath in 2005, and he's back in New Orleans for us tonight.
It wasn't the storm itself that killed so many people and left 80% of New Orleans underwater.
They're trying to dike this levee up.
It was the failure of the levees, designed, built, and maintained by the federal government. They broke in 50 places.
This surge barrier was built to interrupt that flow.
Today, more than 100 miles of new protection encircles the area at a cost of $14.5 billion. And the Army Corps of Engineers says these barriers will hold.
I think we've become competitors with the Dutch in doing this, and we've learned a lot from them, and now they are learning a lot from us.
The system of levees, pumps, and gates is supposed to protect against a 100-year flood, but even a local flood control commissioner questions whether it's enough.
Most cities in Europe have 500 to 1,000-year protection. This is a 100-year protection is considered pretty minimal for a major urban area in the developed world.
This protection guards a city that's about 20% smaller than a decade ago. A $9 billion federal housing program administered by the state was supposed to make it easier for people to come home, and 130,000 families did.
This is completely unprecedented. This is the largest rebuilding program in the history of the United States.
But thousands more haven't come home in areas like the lower 9th Ward, which local activists blame on a program racked with incompetence.
There are many, many residents, homeowners who didn't come back, and partly that's because of the unfairness of the Road Home program.
And Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. The FEMA director's working 24 hours.
Almost from the beginning, the federal government has been trying to make up for the initial response.
What you're seeing here is an example of the incredible federal, state, local partnerships that have helped to revitalize this community.
Today, another president came to praise the recovery, the first African-American president in a much wider and forever changed city.
The hope is that the changes will mostly be for the better, if not all for the better. And an example behind me, just part of that massive flood control effort to keep surging waters from Lake Pontchartrain out of the city, unlike 10 years ago. A massive investment to keep history from repeating itself. Sue?
Scott, as we mentioned, you covered that story for us 10 years ago, and you've been back periodically since then. So I'd like your sense of how the recovery is going.
You know, in some areas, Sue, it is truly impressive, and a lot of this has happened just in the last 2 years. You see a lot of new construction, you see traffic jams, you see a really great influx of people and investment in this city, but it is uneven. You go to the lower 9th Ward, for example, and you can see still just a lot of bare foundations that are sitting there, areas where it hasn't come back. The poverty rate here is back to pre-Katrina levels, or about twice the national average. It's a very uneven recovery.
You said that about 20% in your package, about 20% of the population, it's below that 10-year-ago level. Is that going to be permanent, do you think, or will people relocate as the recovery continues?
Well, you know, the people that look at this say nothing is really permanent, nothing is static in recovery, and that people will come back, but the patterns are different. The demography is different. The racial makeup of this city, it's, as we said, a much whiter city, much more Hispanic city than it was before, but still majority African American. So it really is a moving target.
You mentioned culture. What about the musical culture, which is so legendary for New Orleans? A lot of the musicians relocated. Have they come back after this storm? Has that recovered, or has that also fundamentally changed?
Yeah, you know, we really wondered about that in the immediate aftermath of the storm. Everybody was gone, the local artists, the musicians, the restaurants, of course, were all closed down. That's really come back, and it's one of the bright spots of this recovery. There are more restaurants here than there were before. The musicians are back. It's a younger population. More young people have come back, in part to make their commitment to the city of New Orleans. So that cultural aspect of New Orleans is back, but people are a little more cautious about Mother Nature and about being prepared.
Understandably so. Thank you, Scott, so very much. Appreciate it. Scott Cohn in New Orleans. And coming up tomorrow, Scott will be back. He'll report on the state of the recovery and what companies have done and continue to do to try and help. And finally tonight, Facebook reached a mind-boggling milestone. The social network reported that for the first time, 1 billion people used Facebook in a single day on Monday. To put that into perspective, 1 out of every 7 people on Earth logged into Facebook. Pretty amazing. And that does it for Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you right back here tomorrow night.